Jefferson. Sorry, I forgot to remind you of that. At the corner of two historic avenues in Detroit, at the intersection of Jefferson and Woodward, there's a 24-foot sculpture of a fist cast in bronze. It is the fist of Joe Louis, Detroiter, heavyweight boxing champion, American hero. With his fist, Joe Louis beat Max Schmeling in 1937, in a time when Adolf Hitler was talking about the inferiority of other races to those of the Aryan race. Along with Cleveland's Jesse Owens, Joe Louis demonstrated through athletics in very public contests that Hitler's theories were faulty. This morning's sermon's idea did not start with the idea of the usefulness of fists. In fact, the idea started with the exact opposite idea. You can't hold sand in your fist, and the more you squeeze the sand, the more it slips through your hand. The idea being that the tighter you squeeze to control something, the more futile your efforts. And I don't really like fists. And then I remember the Joe Louis fist in Detroit. The sculpture commemorates what many consider to be the first African-American hero for all of the United States and not just Black folk. President Roosevelt invited Mr. Louis to the White House saying, "Joe, we need muscles like yours to beat Germany. I invite you to make a fist with me." What does it evoke for you? I'm going to ask you to unmute and share what a fist evokes for you.
Strength.
Readiness.
Determination.
Could be anger.
There is something I remember hearing as a kid, that these 5 fingers on their own are nothing, but when you put them together into a fist, they become a mighty force. Anybody remember that? Powerful to behold.
Thank you all for sharing. Today, during the live service, we heard violence. Oh, she left. Violence, power, resistance. So for me, I also, this idea of a fist evokes a feeling of violence. Yeah. But since my reading more about Joe Louis, my ideas about fists have become more nuanced. In part, I think, because I let go of my need to control where the sermon was going. Because I let go of the control and adapted, I went from trying to hold the sermon inside my fist like sand to letting it rest on my palm. Letting my mind and spirit explore the image, and a more fruitful understanding appeared. There have been other famous fists in athletics, of course. I'm speaking specifically of the fists of Tommie Smith and John Carlos right now. These two men, who each stood on the Olympic podium in Mexico City in the 1968 Games, each with a gloved fist raised in the symbol of Black Power salute, one of the most overtly political statements ever made at the Olympics by an athlete. I read recently an article from the Italian magazine Griot about the third person standing on the podium with Tommie Smith and John Carlos. His name was Peter Norman, an Australian. Mr. Norman died in 2006, 38 years after his appearance on the podium in Mexico. Now, lest you think that I read Italian magazines, I'll confess up front that I Googled fist and this article showed up. I don't speak Italian. I don't read the magazine regularly. So on the way to the Olympic podium, Smith and Carlos decided to go barefoot, representing the poverty of people of color, and to wear the black gloves. The problem is they only had one pair of gloves. It was Norman who suggested they share a pair of gloves because the statement might be more powerful that way. Here I'm going to quote from the article in the magazine. Norman was a white man from Australia, a country that had strict apartheid laws, almost as strict as those in South Africa. There was tension and protests in the street of Australia following heavy restrictions on non-white immigration and discriminatory laws against the Aboriginal people, some of which consisted of forced adoptions of Native children into white families. The two Americans asked Norman if he believed in human rights. Norman said that he did. They asked him if he believed in God, and he, who had been in the Salvation Army for a long time, said he believed strongly in God. Here's a quote from John Carlos. "We knew that what we were doing was far greater than any athletic feat, and he said, 'I will stand with you.'" Carlos continued, "I expected to see fear in Norman's eyes, but instead we saw love." Then Norman did something else. He said, "I believe in what you believe. Do you have another one of those that I could wear?" Pointing at the Olympic Project for Human Rights badge on the chest of the other two men. "That way I can show my support for your cause." Smith admitted being astonished, ruminating, "Who was this white Australian guy? He won the silver medal. Can't he just take that and that be enough?" Smith responded that he did not want to give up his medal, also because he would not be denied the badge. There happened to be a white American rower with them, a man named Paul Hoffman, an activist with the Olympic Project for Human Rights. After hearing this exchange, she thought, if a white Australian is going to ask me for my Olympic Project for Human Rights badge, then by God, he's going to have it. Hoffman didn't hesitate. I gave him the only one I had, mine. In the picture, you can see he's wearing the badge. Back in the change-resistant, whitewashed Australia, Norman was treated like an outsider. His family was outcast and work impossible to find. For a time, he worked as a gym teacher, continuing to struggle against inequalities as a trade unionist and occasionally working in a butcher shop. An injury there caused Norman to contract gangrene, which led to issues of depression and alcoholism. So you may have seen the image that we sent out this week, with the man on the podium. And everyone's very focused on the two gentlemen with their hands in the air. Everyone sees that. What you don't see is focus on is Norman has his hands and fists down at his waist to join the protest. And this really upset the Australian people. As John Carlos said, if we were getting beat up, Peter was facing an entire country and suffering alone. For years, Norman had only one chance to save himself. He was invited to condemn his co-athletes, John Carlos and Tommy Smith's gesture, in exchange for a pardon from the system that ostracized him. A pardon that would have allowed him to find a stable job through the Australian Olympic Committee and be part of organizing the 2000 Sydney Olympic Games. Norman never gave in and never condemned the choice of the two Americans. Norman died suddenly of a heart attack in 2006, without his country ever having apologized for their treatment of him. At his funeral, Tommy Smith and John Carlos traveled to Australia, Norman's friend since that 1968 podium event, and were served as his pallbearers, sending him off as a hero. Our hands are capable of so much. I'm going to invite you to try a few with me. So we've already done a fist. So open your hands. Now try to conduct a little bit. You've seen people conduct. Give it a whirl. Right? Now point. I know it's not polite, but do it. Have a little fun. And I'm going to ask you to bring them together. And then we're going to do that thing we all learned as a kid, right? Here is the church, and here is the steeple. Open the door, here's all the people. These hands of ours are amazing, dexterous, strong, supple, gentle. They can do the work of destruction and construction. They can cradle a newborn or wash the newly dearly departed. They make music and art. They are literally at hand all the time. We should celebrate them, but they're so common we often forget about how wonderful they are. When I was a boy, my dad's hands would sometimes have a small quake in them when he was very tired. My dad was a garbage truck driver and worked long hours, and so on weekends he'd be tired. He was pretty handy, but every once in a while a screwdriver would really frustrate him because he couldn't get it aimed into the screwdriver head. My cousin Anne Marie also has this tremor, and I worried for years that I would develop it, and so far I've not. From ages 28 to 36, I had an elderly friend that I met in my home church in Chicago, a man named Wallace Westerholz. Wallace was 63 years my senior, and I watched him struggle mightily with a tremor in his hands that he inherited from his mother. By the time he died, it took him 2 hands to make a signature, and even that was barely recognizable. Even if a tremor in your hand is not what will happen to you as you age, hands do become weaker, less capable of a strong grip as we age, even if you don't suffer from debilitating arthritis. But even hands weakened with age are capable of lovingly holding a child, baking a cake, or holding the hand of a friend in need. Perhaps even more so because age and experience can offer so much in comfort that youth knows nothing of. Look at your hands for a moment. Can you, like me, see one or both of your parents there? Our hands are capable of so many things. We can vote. We can register others to vote. Voting is written directly into our 7 principles. It's number 5. The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large. Our forebears played a very strong role in creating the founding documents of our nation. Jefferson was a primary writer of the Declaration of Independence, for example. The 2nd, 3rd, and 6th presidents of the United States were self-declared Unitarians. John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and John Quincy Adams. It is both our civic and religious duty to vote. Now, neither Reverend Denny nor I will ever tell you or indicate to you in any other fashion, tell you who to vote for, because that would not only be a violation of the law, but it's also a violation of our very core concepts as a free religious church. I can and will, though, and encourage you to vote. There's a big election coming. You can also join the vote and try to get as many votes out there as possible. That I encourage you to do. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but you should try to help people vote. We could choose to go forth in despair at the state of our cities, our nation, and our world, or we could put our hands to good use and do something about it. Our hands, be they strong or weak, youthful or wrinkled, are capable of helping our world to be a better place. Please use them wisely. Amen. And end recording.